Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our New York State Manufacturers Tips to Implement Safety Measures Without Sacrificing Productivity event as a part of the Manufacturing Reimagined webinar series. My name is Tyler Roach, and I will be going over some technical tips and tricks that will be helpful to you while using Remo. First of all, welcome to Remo, our virtual event platform. You may have noticed Remo is very different from other online platforms. When you enter the event, you will be dropped into an open seat at one of the tables. To move tables, simply double-click on the table you want to join. If you have trouble reading the table labels, you can pinch zoom on your laptop's trackpad, or if you have a mouse, scroll to zoom in. Additionally, you can click and hold on the white space between tables and drag the map around to get a better view of the conference floor. When moving tables, your camera and microphone may take a second to reconnect. You can also click on a different avatar bubbles to see a person's name, contact information, and even send them a direct message. You'll also notice you have a toolbar along the bottom of your screen. You can use this to send messages to the general chat that everyone can see, or the table chat that just your table can see. If you'd like to enlarge the presentation, do so by clicking the 4 arrows in the top right corner of the picture you'd like to enlarge. To be able to see all of the presenters again, press the escape button on your computer. I hope everybody enjoys today's conference. And at this time, I'd like to invite today's presenters to the stage, Eric Fasser, Alan Gans, and Henry Weber.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Alan. We're just waiting on Henry. Henry, you got to click your camera and microphone button. There he is.
I got it. I didn't have the.
Excellent. All right. Alan, if you want to get the presentation queued up, I'm going to start doing the introductory stuff. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eric Fasser. I'm the Design and Engineering Solutions Specialist with FuseHub. I'll be the host for today's event, which is brought to us by the Manufacturing Reimagined series. This is a program sponsored by New York Manufacturing Extension Partnership, or MEP. And as part of our mission to support New York's many small and medium-sized manufacturers, the Manufacturing Reimagined series offers training in the form of webinars and virtual workshops, plus the opportunity to have one-on-one discussions with our solutions experts to help get guidance and find out what potential funding for projects can help manufacturers address COVID-related challenges. So before we begin, a couple logistic items. I just want to reiterate a couple things that Tyler said about the Remo platform we're using. And just FYI, this is something we're going to be using more in the future for networking capabilities, so it's just good to know. So the platform Remo is a little bit different than a traditional webinar. You still have the option of submitting questions via Q&A link on the right side of your screen. Additionally, when we enter the presentation mode, if you click on the presentation screen itself, the little screen, you can enlarge it and then hit escape to go back to the speaker view that we're in now. Hopefully you had a chance to do some networking before we started, but if not, we're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so in conversation with my guests. Then we'll address some questions, and if time allows, there may be an opportunity for additional networking at the end. So let's get started. The title of this event is Tips to Implement Safety Measures Without Sacrificing Productivity. Now, most people think that when you add safety measures related to social distancing and purchasing PPE like face shields, putting up physical barriers, or doing extra disinfection and sanitation, it's going to cause interference with the manufacturing process and hurt your productivity. But I'm joined today by two gentlemen who are going to show us that that's not always the case. So I'd like to introduce Henry Weber and Alan Gans. They're the President and Chief Technology Officer, respectively, of GW Process Optimization. It's a consulting firm that provides manufacturing companies with customized, actionable solutions to optimize the processes at their sites. Now, you can read their bios online to learn more about their experience and skills in manufacturing, but I just want to point out some key credentials that they bring to this discussion. So Henry is an activist, pioneer, a developer, and promoter of customized real-time products, from measurement acquisition straight through to making remote observers feel like they're actually on site. And Alan spent years advising on and developing biomedical and diagnostic instrumentation with organizations like Johns Hopkins Medical Center and Fortune 500 firms. So Gentlemen, your approach looks at the CDC guidelines, looks at initiatives to enhance productivity, and wraps that all up into a strategy to achieve both safety and profitability. Alan, I'm going to ask you to kick it off and help explain how this is possible.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to do that. And I just want to say that almost everything you said was correct, but I'm going to fight with you about the title.
Of course.
Because what we really wanted to have was tips to implement enhanced safety while increasing manufacturing productivity. And I think you guys felt that nobody would show up to a webinar that had an unbelievable title. And it's our goal, Henry's and mine, to make that concept believable, both more safety and more productivity. And the strategy we have is a relatively simple one. It has points, and they will evolve in the course of this discussion. But I want to remind everyone that they're all going to be customized for the individual site. So what we're going to do is to give an overview of what that's all about. So let's take a look at what the world looks like now. And I really want to be very clear that while we welcome all listeners, people of all types who have cultural interests and abstract interests, it's really you, the decision makers, the plant managers, and the supervisors we're talking to. Because only if this is implemented will Henry and I fulfill our crusade. And we do have a crusade, let's be clear, that we believe that safe and productive manufacturing is possible right now, and it's much easier than anybody realized. So let's take a look at what the world looks like for everybody, but most particularly for you plant managers and supervisors. Decisions not just about safety, but even about your production are usually based on real data and real science. But unfortunately, not everything. And a lot of it is based on intuition, experience, gut, whatever you want to call it. And that is unfortunately magnified during this economic and pandemic crisis. Not only are you concerned about the quality of your product, but you're concerned also about the quality and the ability of your business to proceed. And all of this is based on primarily good data, good science, but a lot of intuition. I want to let you know ahead of time that Henry is going to relieve one of your problems and give you more good data and more good science where you might really need it. Okay, so where do we go to when we're trying to get some guidance? Well, the CDC. Yes, I know you all have heard all the things that have been going on the last few days. What's all this about? So in August, can you guys see my cursor? In August, no. Okay, August 12th, 2020, the CDC posted a lot of words, but you know most of these words, 6 feet and wear masks and all of that good stuff. But they said there were two, and only two modalities of infection. Okay, that was their opinion in August. We had a disagreement with that, but we were in very big company. And about a week after that posting, this paper came out. And it's one among very many that said, you know what, there really are 3 modalities. And we'll talk about those modalities momentarily. The World Health Organization in July had its arm twisted and agreed, yep, there really are 3. Okay, so what are we going to do? What are you, the plant managers, supposed to do? And even the people who are supposed to be in the know can't decide on the basic science. Well, you might have had some good luck because last Friday, the CDC said, yep, we recognize the third one, aerosols, okay? But then on Monday, they rescinded that. Now what are you going to do? That's really a problem. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just provide you the background science that I think is pretty much non-controversial, and not terribly different from the way you plant managers sometimes have to make your product. Let's take a look at this. I'd like to think of it from a physicist's point of view, namely an intuitive model. But I think it's really from the point of view of the plant manager, because there's another aspect here, an aspect of fear. We've really got to acknowledge that even if you personally are not fearful, lots of people in your area really are. So how is the disease transmitted? On the left, we have a fella. Let's assume that those droplets that are coming out have the virus inside of them. Where do those droplets come from? We've all heard it, sneezing, coughing, or if you're a guy like me who talks so effusively, probably just in ordinary conversation. And so we're told stand 6 feet apart and things will be, well, kind of okay. Just don't get in the way of those droplets, because with certainty, if you are, you will inhale some of those droplets. Those droplets will go down into your lung, and if they're in your lungs, your system is going to now start creating antibodies. And let's hope that there are enough antibodies so that you don't get sick. But your immune system is certainly going to go into operation. So inhaling droplets is a no-no. Second thing is 6 feet apart. Well, people have thought that droplets fall to the ground, fall to surfaces within 6 feet. So surfaces are going to be contaminated. What does that mean? Well, it's kind of like a pasty stuff on top of surfaces. They don't volatilize, so they're not going to come up later on. But that means if you stroke the surfaces and touch your face, you're going to risk having those droplets enter your nose or mouth. And so you'll see me during this conversation stroking my face with a clean tissue because I know it's true. And I kind of want to remind you that it's probably a good idea to realize that COVID could be anywhere. These two modalities are beyond question. Everybody is comfortable with that. The third modality, aerosol, is where the controversy is. And I like to explain that because if you have a physical model of what's going on here, not only will you be better able to address things in the factory, but frankly, you'll be able to address things better in your personal life. If you go to the movies, if your kids are going to school, if you go to an auditorium of any sort, a house of worship, what should you know? Well, aerosols are just small droplets. By definition, most people's definition, they're 5 microns or smaller. And yeah, they can get through a lot of masks. And so what do? They don't fall to the ground like the cigar smoker on the right. Those particles are smoke-like and they waft in the air. So that's why a lot of folks say, and the scientists have demonstrated, I think conclusively in several papers, that there is a third modality through the air. It's called aerosols, and they can go tens of feet. One of the things we recommend and keep in mind is the value of having an air curtain. What do you mean by an air curtain? Nothing more complicated than a fan. If there are 2 people facing each other, and they do this frequently, having a fan which blows air away from them and hopefully toward an exhaust vent would be really very strategic. Don't sit near the exhaust. So the other day when I was in a large auditorium, the first thing I looked for is where does the air come in? Where does it go out? And I sat right where the air comes in because I really feel that this aerosol business is really something to take seriously. And I didn't want to be in the pathway. So what do we have here?
Hey, Alan, before you continue, you encouraged me during our previous discussions to interrupt you with questions. So I want to just jump in real quick. You mentioned the 6-foot rule, and previously we kind of talked about the history of that, where that came from. Can you just real quick in 20 seconds or so just mention that same conversation?
1934, paper done by a fellow by the name of Wells. You could look it up on Wikipedia. Estimated because of, I guess it was tuberculosis that he was studying, which was known to be airborne, that it was carried by droplets, and these droplets fell to the ground, he estimated, in 2 meters.
Yeah.
And, the physics hasn't changed. It's probably true, but our sophistication and understanding transmission has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen that video where they've tested different types of masks, and you can see, depending on the material, depending on how well it fits, and a number of factors, you can see how the droplets and the aerosols and whatnot all go different distances, many times more than 6 feet. So.
And it's very important to realize also that masks are there not just to prevent your potential illness from affecting other people, but from their potential illness for you. Masks also protect. But we can save that for questions for later on.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm a New Yorker. It's rude not to interrupt, so please don't feel free. Anyway, so what can somebody do? What can you, a plant manager, do? Well, you can recognize the situation. We're not fighting with the CDC. What we're looking at is CDC makes guidelines, not laws. And if you have a model, and there's very, very good scientific evidence to believe that aerosols are important, you might be able to do something. And really, those solutions are very, very inexpensive. Fans, an awareness of the movement of air, and, air purifiers also using HEPA filters or UVC. And of course, this is the concept of every place is specific. Every place has to be dealt with custom. But I'm giving you a general notion about it's not that big a deal to protect. Yes, you wear the masks, but be aware of the possibility of aerosols. Personally, I'm not too concerned about surfaces because it's a philosophy. If you recognize that surfaces can be contaminated, just don't put your hands on your face. That's about it, because the stuff is not going to pop up off the surface. It doesn't matter if your hand is gloved or not, unless there's some psychological advantage, because the virus doesn't penetrate through the skin on your hand. It enters the body through the nose and through the mouth, maybe through the eyes and ears too, but mainly through the nose and mouth. And so just keep your hands off your face. So the problem with all of this is that it's really very qualitative. And it's kind of like what I would call legacy manufacturing, in the sense that we know a lot, we understand the basic science, but we kind of really wish we had numbers we could measure. How much threat do I have right here at this moment? We have no such technology to date.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing is those are some good suggestions. Quick ideas that you can implement pretty efficiently, pretty easily, and I like that there's a lot of science behind it. And I think you're going to get to this next. We also talked about some of the factors that keep companies from being able to focus on these types of projects. And one of them is this supposed tug of war between keeping people safe and healthy and also trying to keep the business productive and profitable.
Yeah, so this is a worldwide problem. Anyone on planet Earth knows that people have strong and passionate opinions these days, seemingly about everything. But this is a particularly critical one, because when the argument is posed as lockdown, stay at home, don't venture forth, yeah, there's no question that to some extent that will guard your health. On the other hand, the economies will run down. It will be very hard to pay the bills. And so this issue between staying alive and making a living really becomes a tug of war and gets us nowhere. What we recommend is what we call our slope of one strategy, which takes these two vectors and rotates them. And now you can see on one axis we have safety, on another axis we have productivity, and we have the beginning of a discussion where we can take action. So there is no trade-off. There is no tug of war. We need to have an adequate amount of safety. And what I have done so far is give you some hints as to what are the threats. And there are three only, okay, all of which stem from droplets. And so now you pretty much know what you need to be able to do. But there's also going to be an issue of productivity, and that will be Henry's subject shortly. But I just want to mention that what we call slope of one takes care of both of those things at the same time. As safety needed to be straightforward and inexpensive, so too must productivity. So, how many times have you heard we're all in this together, we're all in this together? This time, it's really true, because a workforce that feels safety, a workforce that's actually safe, okay, really will do a much better job than one that feels threatened. And so what we really have, and going back to the past slide, is employers need a healthy workforce to generate revenue, and employees need a profitable factory to generate wages. So we really have a win-win situation when everything is handled properly. So in game theory, what we're seeking is equilibrium. That's the bottom bullet, where there's no incentive to deviate. In fact, not only is there no incentive to deviate, when this is made clear, there are lots of incentives to be compliant and mutually supportive. So 2 out of the 3 elements in slope of one are disinfection and productivity, and they are put together with game theory. Okay, well, we've hinted about game theory. We've discussed disinfection. Now, Henry, please tell us about productivity.
With pleasure. Okay. Does your desk look like this? Have you wished you could get into smart manufacturing someday, but were concerned with complexity, security, and cost? Well, today is someday, especially with COVID as a catalyst. Next. Here's the answer to that sloppy desk you just saw. As an example, simply take a monitoring device like what's in this suitcase and start taking data and send it right to the cloud. This step 1 is really the passport to smart manufacturing that doesn't cost a king's ransom.
So Alan, you just made Henry, you made a point that the COVID is the catalyst. Explain what you mean by that a little bit more. Are these projects people are sitting on and just don't have the means or the expertise to do it? What's driving that?
Okay. There are hesitations to do the project because of people believing that the projects may be too costly or take too much time, or people are hesitant for change and things like that. But using an example like this, which has simple components in there, like a computer, small computer, a data collection device on the left upper corner there, some sensors, and some other electronics, you can be up and running and collecting information very rapidly. And so it's an easy way, the key to open up smart manufacturing.
Okay, I know you've done a lot of projects that are proprietary you can't talk about, but this is something that it's scalable, it's adaptable to any number of different processes that you want to measure and quantify.
Yes, it can be. You can hook up to, no matter if you're a batch manufacturer of a process, or you are running an assembly line, or you have a continuous process. They're unique variables that and key numbers that drive your business that a simple device like this can be hooked up to. That's correct. Okay. Next slide. Okay, step 2 is adding live video. Why don't you have a Zoom session with your tanks? Why? Well, you can pop into your factory from your desk or location, answer questions, and make sure your staff is doing the right thing. You can do this right now. Take something like this, the smartphone, and instead of focusing on a face, turn it around and focus it on things like your critical equipment, your manufacturing line, or process.
Now, Henry, I asked you this the other day, and I'm going to ask you again for the benefit of everyone else, but this seems really simple. If you're already taking data from a piece of equipment, what's the benefit of getting video from it as well?
Good question. The idea of a video is that you can visualize what's going on and see the whole perspective. Okay, and so the key thing is combining both steps 1 and step 2. So in this slide, okay, you can, by putting it all together, real-time factory data on the top, sent via excuse me, sent via the monitoring device to the cloud to a remote viewer, is one stream of information, and the live video of the manufacturing site also gets sent to the cloud. So the remote viewer can simultaneously see both the data and the video to really understand what's going on. And by the way, the viewer can visit multiple sites and see multiple things.
Yeah, and talk a bit about who might that viewer be? Who might find this information useful?
Okay, the viewer could be the manager, the boss. The viewer can be a process engineer. The viewer can be even a vendor who, using the video and the data, can diagnose an issue and solve the problem right on the spot. And know right away, say a certain part is needed, it can be shipped right away and then installed. Often a visit, a technician may come, study the situation, and say, I got to order a part. Days go by, and by the time the machine is fixed, it's been down several days. Downtime is very costly. So the video also avoids trips.
Right. So yeah, in addition to travel expenses, you're getting around the whole social distancing. You even talked about having customers or potential customers being able to check in and kind of see the process, get a feel of what your quality is like and things like that.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, we've had applications where companies would send entourages of people to the plant to test things and see things and make sure their supplier was doing the right thing. Then they did this virtual participation, and instead of sending entourages, they maybe sent one person who could then beam back to their plant and see what's going on, or no one, and they could virtually participate.
Yep.
Okay. Next slide. Okay, done as a tabletop demo, this is what a viewer not at the site would get to see. A person pours in some chemicals on the right side, you can see, and changes can be seen immediately on the left. Here we're getting data every 10 seconds. And a data security concern can be handled by changing the headings. In this case, from temperature and pH to variable 1 and 2. Also, the actual data can be seen as raw voltages rather than calibrated units, like 72 degrees Fahrenheit, room temperature, or pH of 7.
Right. So you've got a tabletop demo. So you're seeing a live version of what's going on. Simultaneously, you're seeing the data, which can be encoded, and so there's no security code concerns there. And you're seeing that real time, off-site, anywhere in the world.
That is correct. You summarized it perfectly. Okay, next slide. So why not enter the world of smart manufacturing now? It's not complex, setup is easy, and can be done quickly. It can be easily configured to legacy equipment, and it's scalable. Data is secure, and the investment, most importantly, is minimal. And the value that can be seen quickly continues beyond the pandemic period. Next. Alan, would you like to summarize?
Yeah, I'd like to pick up something before I do that on your data over there. You made the statement that it's secure, and I'd like you, rather than me, to explain how that data, if it got into somebody's hands, could be sanitized so they really could absolutely not use it, and there's no fear of putting your numbers in the cloud.
Okay, well, as I mentioned briefly before, if you look at the two columns on the left side, the first column says temperature, Fahrenheit, and which happens to be the blue line in the plot, and the second column being pH, being the orange plot. They don't have to be labeled that. They can be labeled variable 1 or variable 2 or any name for that matter. So somebody, if they got a hold of this data, wouldn't know what variable 1 or variable 2 is meaning. Now, in each column, you can see like the temperature, it says 72 degrees and the pH is 6.6. You can put those in voltages. So one may be 2.3 volts and another is 4.8 volts, and nobody knows what that is, considering, and they don't even know what the headings are. So if that's,
So Alan, it sounds like maybe you've had clients with some of these concerns before.
You know, the issue of security, I think, is a huge one, because every day we hear about hacks and this and that. And then the question is, well, you know, if it's my credit card or my social security number, yikes. But what about everyday data that we take? And certainly the banks and all insurance companies and so forth must be so vigilant. I can't possibly be vigilant enough to protect the security of my own factory data. And the answer is, so what? So make sure that the data that if anybody hacks it is useless. And that's the solution to the problem. That's not an excuse to be sloppy about security. It's merely an explanation that there genuinely is nothing to worry about as long as you're not putting your procedures and your other confidential information up. All we're talking about now is measurements. And these measurements are done every few seconds, and they're mechanized. So it's not somebody writing something down. When you have data, you can make changes, you can make improvements. When you don't have data, as is often the case in legacy systems, it's tough to make an improvement. So to summarize, what are the three parts of the slope of one? The first part has to do with the pandemic. And what we've presented briefly is a model of reality to understand what exactly the threats are, and also to express that even though there are worldwide institutions that have, well, I won't call them regulations, I'll call them recommendations, it's a good idea to have your thumb on the latest information so you can conscientiously take care of your staff and let them know that they're being taken care of. Smart manufacturing has so many implications. What we're really talking about now, with a staff that has been clearly shown that management is sensitive to their safety, is a staff that's going to be receptive to changes. That's why it's someday. That quantum leap into the next version of how to do manufacturing is now possible with a receptive staff. Well, do we have the technology to make that happen? What Henry modestly didn't tell you is the reason that was a suitcase is he created that to be able to show decision makers, managers on their desktop or the conference room table exactly what will happen. And in the afternoon, take that same suitcase, bring it to the factory and start getting data. It's really that straightforward. So I think that the opportunity now, the convergence, when you look at it in terms of the slope of one, when you look at it in terms of game theory, is really very opportune. Why settle for just surviving? Why not thrive? The ideas we have here for smart manufacturing transcend the pandemic. They're really kick it up a notch. And furthermore, I hate to say it, a lot of this COVID-19 was predicted by many immunologists 2 or 3 years ago. And I don't think the world is through. So we may as well recognize that it's a dangerous world. You plant managers know that very, very well. And we can take action right now. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Eric? Eric? You sound.
We had a bunch of fire trucks going by, so I muted myself for a
Oh,
second.
okay. Maybe you can repeat what you said.
Yeah.
I thought I didn't talk enough, Eric.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you very much, Henry and Alan. Before we start taking questions, I did want to mention something that ties back in with the part about this someday project, this entering into smart manufacturing. Is it expensive? How affordable is it? So we do have some resources available as part of this COVID recovery initiative, this Manufacturing Reimagined program. There are actually 4 programs, and 3 in addition to Manufacturing Reimagined, that have some funding opportunities and other assistance available being offered by New York MEP. And you can learn about them at the website shown on this slide here, the one at the bottom, the newyorkmep.org. Or if you go to the bottom of the floor plan in the Remo event, there's a link there to the program. And so you can find out about those opportunities. You can find out about additional events coming up. And you can find out there's a second link that goes directly to what we're calling a resource report. So this is where you can send some information in. We'll have a specialist get in touch with you and find out specifically what we can help you with in terms of the many New York assets that are available to provide assistance with some of these issues. We're calling it a resource report. It's a free report. We customize it for you. It's a physical document we'll give to you. And again, we'll have a discussion and we'll put it together and link you up with some assets. And that actually is part of the process to be able to apply for the funding. So it's definitely worth looking into. And as I mentioned, there's 3 other programs also with information on the site that offer various forms of assistance. So definitely check those out. And with that, I want to open it up to Q&A. So once again, a huge thank you to our guests, Henry and Alan, and to all our attendees. I'm going to let Tyler get in touch with me, but I do have a question of my own to kind of kick things off. So Henry, this one's for you. The smart manufacturing example that you showed really does transcend COVID in that it can be customized to capture data from any equipment and any type of data, really, depending on type of sensors you use. But what's like a general time frame that it would take to implement something like that?
Okay, that's it can range. Alan just before mentioned that I could take the step 1 and step 2, bring it to a boardroom table, show it to somebody in the afternoon, hook it up to a plant, and I've done that several times. And so it's a matter of hours that you could do this thing.
Okay, so even if you were starting from scratch, not having somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, here's my situation," we're not talking months of lead time. We're talking much shorter.
In general, you'd want to, have a discussion with the plant people. You want to be able to work with them and understand what their problems are, and of course, then virtually you can take a look at where the application is, can discuss what pain points they have and information they need to measure, and then either be there and install it, or my preference, virtually do it.
Yeah.
Send a suitcase and virtually, because it's pretty simple, instruct somebody how to hook it up. And so it's a matter up to a few days would be, so you could do it in an afternoon or up to a few days of interaction. But
certainly within the time frame of some of the funding limitations we're offering, which are like through next August. So that's definitely not a concern. Now, you just mentioned something that's interesting and kind of ties in with my next question. You talked about shipping a product or shipping a solution, a physical solution to a client so they can implement it with some virtual assistance. So Alan, I want to ask you about this. Let's say I work at a factory in my facility. I'm in charge of handling the incoming supplies, whether it's boxes of stuff or raw materials. Do I need to be concerned about catching COVID from those items? And should I wear gloves? Is that going to help?
I'd love to answer the question. Will you give me permission to add a little bit to Henry's response before I answer that question?
Of course.
We have, I think, an unusual perspective in Slope of One to tie things in inexpensively. But we also have a corporate strategy. We have a team of about 10 people working here, not Henry and me. And our strategy permits us to just fix something, but our philosophy prefers working within an organization to help change it if that's what it wants. So what Henry was speaking about is really very, very unusual. He can show you how to put the first one in, and your team, in the process of working with this virtual participation, now knows how to put all the other ones in. So what Henry is really saying is we have a way to put ourselves out of business. We're not trying to just get more and more of the same and say, okay, leave it to us. We're trying to transform business. We have a crusade here. There's a crisis. There are supply chain issues. There's going to be onshoring. We've got to have manufacturing really work in this country. And with the mechanisms that Henry has developed, we're able to answer questions without having to make site visits. We can answer 5 or 6 questions in the course of a day, perhaps, and then nothing for another week, just by a few clicks. So this is a really transformative way of doing things. Now, to your question about handling things. That's an interesting question from my perspective, because I assume that most people should believe that unless they've taken precautions, everything is contaminated. And if every surface is contaminated, the doorknob, the desk you're working at, everything, then what do you really need to do? A, you have to feel comfortable being skeeved by all this creepy stuff. But B, don't touch your face. So all of this stuff I've been doing has either been because I have a crazy twitch or because I'm trying to illustrate something all along. Don't touch your face. Here I have something clean to enable that to happen. So I don't think there's an intrinsic danger. However, I don't want to have a dirty desk, and I make sure that my desk is disinfected or that no one has come into the area that I'm working on. So if I'm now going to bring into the factory, how should I say, potentially contaminated goods in areas that people have scrupulously made clean, I probably want to put that box, that package, into something that has been, I would say purified, cleansed, decontaminated by either UV or ozone before I'd send it out into the factory. The person himself, herself, not a danger as long as that person doesn't touch the face. Beyond that, that really depends on the, what I'll call the environment. Clear?
Clear. All right, we did have a question come in. I'm going to open this up to both of you because it's kind of an open-ended question. But question is, what is typically the starting point? How do you figure out what to prioritize first?
Let me take that unless you have something to say, Henry.
Well, you could start it, and I'll add to it.
The reason I want to do it because I'm clearly a talker. And the first thing you do is you shut up and listen. Because value is really what the client says. What are your goals, client? What are your assets? What are your challenges? What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? It's really an interactive thing. And to say that we have a formula that goes beyond shut up and listen, okay, is really unfair. It's very much site dependent. But I think the questioner really wanted something more specific. And I'll just give you a little hint. When you're talking about disinfection, I think it's a good idea to recognize what the flow is of your workers, what is normal, so that we at least have some idea environmentally what we're talking about, where are your vents and so forth. And the second thing is when you're talking about your electronics, do you have on your devices any ways to make measurements? If you don't have ways to make measurements that can go onto a computer, add them. Henry has done brilliant work in taking VFDs, for example, that were antiquated, finding some gadget or another, and from those VFDs, adding devices that made old factories look like new and gotten incredibly good data. So the second point is to look at readiness to be able to collect data. If your place is disinfected or about to be disinfected, and if your equipment is ready to deliver data, you're in business. Want to add to that, Henry?
I think you pretty much covered that. But yeah, you summarized that question.
I think one of the points that I like that you made, Alan, was about about the readiness, and I think that ties back in with the timeliness of this all and how again these are initiatives that make sense at any time, but especially now when companies are experiencing supply chain issues, distribution issues, not knowing what their new customer requirements are going to be. Now's the time to get more productive and more profitable by taking on some of these more comprehensive projects.
Eric, my economic model is a recession. People believe that future futures are like past futures, meaning we'll get out of the recession, meaning we'll get out of this thing too in the future. Well, what do you want the future to be? once you have a workforce that's really attentive and thinking about change, because it's right there in front of them, there are fans, there are masks, there are all kinds of things there. This workforce is now prepared for other kinds of changes also. That's why it's someday. If these modifications are both inexpensive and leveraged to do good, when this thing ends, you're going to come out with really gangbusters, turbocharged to get market share, more revenue, to be a winner.
Sounds good. So another question, and this goes to kind of a key component of the smart manufacturing, right? That's the setup. So we've touched on this a little bit a couple of different times, but it seems to be a kind of an important issue to people. So it sounds like it bears repeating. But question is, what kind of safety precautions do you recommend when doing the initial installation process? So I assume this means for a solution like the example you showed, if it's a sensor, sending data to the cloud, setting up a video screen, and you talked a little bit about you would prefer to do that all remotely, but if you would just kind of walk us through, I guess, in a little more detail about that whole process and how you can still do that while maintaining the safety.
Okay, well, the plant, for example, would have a certain number of workers there. I'm assuming the plant is open and is producing, albeit it may be a reduced staff. So I would, as an example, to walk one through, I would do some virtual participation with managers, with some engineers, with some plant people who are already respecting safety guidelines, okay, and have already understood the airflows and things like that. So by being in an area, they are safe, given that is satisfied. They can take the video communication and be able to stream back to me where and when we're identifying what their specific need is, where are we taking data, what devices, is it a tank, is it an assembly line, are we trying to get information from speed, from a drive or power, are we looking for vibration censoring, are we looking at other items that may be relevant to them. So we deciding that, and then once they have the proper sensors and electronics, that can be taken initially in a portable fashion and brought right to the site. I can give instruction, or somebody on my staff can give instruction on hooking it up. We can do testing virtually, looking at data and video, and demonstrate collection. So that the safety measure is kind of inherent. The first step is the safety, and given people are comfortable, you can take hardware and work virtually in a safe environment to install it.
Okay, so implement some of those measures from the first part of the presentation to create that environment, and then most of the other stuff can be done virtually.
That's correct.
Right? Instructing someone. Okay.
Let's discuss this for just a moment. Please excuse me. That part is getting glossed over. I want to make sure it's very clear. We have to be able to use platforms that are self-secure. Otherwise, we have high risks. And so we have already used platforms like Zoom, which everybody remembers was attacked way in the beginning. And God bless it, because it was attacked so viciously and so violently that those folks really had to make sure that became a very secure platform, which it did. People worried that it might go out of business. The stock price rose fantastically. So we're also talking about very, very secure platforms like Microsoft Azure, okay, for data, and Zoom, and other things as well, Slack, to be very, very cautious about the integrity of the safety of the data.
So not just personal safety, but the safety of the data as well.
And also, I can add to that, the safety of transmission of the data. Okay, there are devices that you can send up to the cloud, the data, even with different labels and voltages and things we talked about earlier, you can encode those things and send them up safely, and no one really understands what's being sent up, and it'll be very hard to decode.
Yeah.
I like playing Can You Top That? I got another one for you. How about the fact that we can do this without involving the IT department? There are offline technologies to enable no interference with the IT department. Sure, they're going to have to pass judgment on the quality, but we don't even have to do this from the network that's inside the factory. No interference, at least in the beginning. So we've really thought through this thing. That's why in this webinar, what we have is just an outline.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we have time for one more question, and this one I like this one because it's very short, and I think you're going to have fun answering it. Somebody asked, "Why is this your crusade?"
It's such a big deal now. Come on, this is a great country. We're living in difficult times. If 80% of the penicillin or antibiotics is made abroad, if the world is changing so rapidly, without any hesitation, I recognize that we're going to have to be prepared as a civilization in the United States of America to be able to handle something brand new. There are an enormous number, the vast majority of factories are legacy factories. We have a simple solution, okay? And it's time now. So instead of being defensive and sulking, let's be bold and proactive. It's for the good of everybody.
And if you look at statistics, 95% or greater of the plants in the U.S. are small, medium manufacturers, and the larger companies and larger plants, they have the money and can afford the expensive solutions. The small, medium manufacturers who we want to support, they can't. So having clever, inexpensive solutions that they can realize gains in a matter of hours or days, we think is worthwhile. And it's a worthwhile crusade to enable that.
Yeah, and the thing I like about that part of the answer is, the crusade is to help these smaller companies to enable them to use this data to their own benefit. Has nothing to do with COVID. It's timeless. But the fact that now COVID is kind of amplifying all of this need for productivity and profitability. It's just that much more important now. So on that note, guys, once again, a huge thank you to our guests, Henry Weber and Alan Gans, and to all of our attendees. I believe there was a notice that it's opened up for additional networking after, so stick around for that if you want. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.